Yeah, David Dread of Steel Pulse, and I'm saying hail to Lion Voice because it's time that the lion have its voice, have its own story. Says I'm stepping out here. Hear me now. Yeah, the lion's voice. Raw.
Well, front to us a son was born and a child was given.
I want to ask you a question. Have you got your book? Haile Selassie's Ethiopia Volume 1, The Rise of the Priest Warrior King. I've read the book in its entirety, and I must say it's very inspirational, very informative, and very historical, right?
Them call him Ras Tafari. When he was born, rain fall from sky. Them call him Ras Tafari. When he was grown in airplanes he fly. They call him Ras Tafari. Lion break the chain, weep not, don't cry. Them call him Ras Tafari. Read the Revelation chapter 5 verse 5. Then born near the city of Harar, the inspiration for Bob Marley's guitar. People crowd him like some big superstar. It no matter if England
or talk to I rather about cannabis, how that fits into your ministry. What place does cannabis have in the rebuilding of this Edenic state for the planet?
Oh, that's a phenomenal question, another fantastic question. I am an advocate of something called comprehensive health equity as part of the comprehensive health equity movement, the CHEM movement. And so comprehensive health equity has four major pillars. It has the economic pillar, it has the human pillar, it has the social pillar, and it has the environmental pillar. If I had to choose one plant that can serve as a vehicle, that can serve as a conduit, that can serve as a channel in all of those pillars, the economic pillar, I would choose cannabis because cannabis has 50,000 plus uses. We can make paper, we can make planes. We have made a plane out of cannabis. We can make cars and fuel the car using cannabis. We can absolutely make everything that wood can make, plastics can make, fiberglass can make from cannabis. Over 50 plus thousand uses of this particular plant. And so that makes it not just a cash crop. Cash crop would be a kind of like an insult to cannabis. It's a super cash crop. And so it's a crying shame that so many African nations still have it criminalized. But that's only because of the Eurocentric dominance over these African nations, because all of these African nations that currently have cannabis criminalized, when they go to their shamans, when they go to their wisdom keepers, when they go to their spiritualists, they will tell them that cannabis is absolutely used in ancient times as sacrament, among other things. So cannabis is an economic powerhouse, bar none. There's no other crop on the planet that can give the yield in terms of economic benefit, green benefit that, of course, cannabis can engage. From a human equity perspective, that's the educational component, that's the human development component. Cannabis is actually nutrition. We know it's the seeds is one of the best sources of protein on the planet, great for babies. The seeds can also be used as feed for cattle as well. Absolutely phenomenal. Everything can be used from root to stem and flower, and everything in between can be used. And so from a human equity perspective, if we teach cannabis right, if we educate our people right, we'd be able to revolutionize our economies, and we'd be much better off as a result of cannabis, including, of course, the medicinal component, which falls in the health equity pillar as well. So from a food perspective, from a medicine perspective, from an education perspective, cannabis can serve all of those needs there. Let's turn to the environmental equity perspective. There's something called carbon sequestration, which is the ability of any botanical plant to engage in the sequestration of carbon, which is to say, convert carbon into what? Oxygen. So we want to oxygenate the planet. We want to get rid of these CO2s. And to get rid of these CO2s and to allow for as much oxygen to as it will be released into the atmosphere, cannabis is absolutely one of those go-to botanicals, which is in the top 5 carbon sequestrating plants on the planet. And so, as a means of getting rid of CO2s, then if you want carbon credits, plant cannabis because cannabis is the best way to go about that process. If you have polluted land where you would have had maybe some kind of dump, some type of wasteland, all kinds of lead, all kinds of mercury from batteries, all kind of baby pampers, and all kinds of runoff and spill off is in that land, and you want to as it will find a natural means of purifying that land. Well, cannabis, like bamboo, has the ability of purifying the soil, purifying impure water channels and waterways. And so it's a purifying plant, it's a purifying agent. We haven't talked about smoking yet. We talked about economic equity, we talk about human equity, we talk about environmental equity. We're talking about save the planet. When I was a child, there was a cartoon called Captain Planet. Well, cannabis is our Captain Planet, please and thank you. It is the one botanical that can literally save the planet and bring us from the brink of extinction, where we are hanging over the precipice of climate change and climate disaster. If we only increase by 1.5 more degrees Celsius, we would find many low-lying cities and certainly islands underwater. Barbados and islands, the likes of that, are under tremendous threat by the global warming phenomena. And to think we've been criminalizing and chopping off the Ras and as it were killing Rastafari over a plan that we should have been paying them to grow all along. Shame on all of the Babylonians and crazy bald heads who have been leading our Caribbean communities. I tell them all the time, when you see me, know that there's a difference between a non-dread and a bald head. I am not a bald head. I am a non-dread Rastafari. Yes, because I connect, I vibe with Rastafari. I understand their frequency, and His Imperial Majesty even visits I in dreams. Many of the things I teach and do comes from His Imperial Majesty, the great ancestor himself. And so I can't deny Rastafari. But insofar as I'm not carrying the crown, His Imperial Majesty didn't carry the crown either. But there's a distinction.
And we wouldn't call him an ancestor, but carry on. Go ahead.
Well, I say ancestor not from the perspective that you may overstand. I'm saying it from a perspective such that all great Africans who have lived, who have left a footprint on the earth for other Africans to then take up the baton and take up the ball to be able to flow and run in, are referred to within African cosmology as ancestors. May not be used within Rastafari, but I'm using the more generic Pan-African term in terms of it, to pay homage to those great ones who have come.
I don't want to stray your reasoning. Continue, because you are touching. I'm just in so much joy. I'm also watching the time. We're going to try to end this by 10 o'clock. We're going to be respectful for the time. This is the Lion Voice Network. If you have not done so, please click the subscribe button. We are bringing the cutting edge in terms of our Pan-African family to the table. This is going to be, get used to this brethren too, because we're going to bring him forward. We're going to be doing panel discussions. I have big plans for this platform. My superpower is the network. So we're going to bring people who can add value, and I hope you see the value. This brethren is a walking encyclopedia. The knowledge is just spewing forth. We don't have enough time, but we're going to do our best. Continue on the cannabis topic, please, my brother.
So with regards to the last health equity pillar, which is the pillar of social equity, that's where our policies and as it were, those drivers of social behavior and culture comes in. And so from a social equity perspective, you're talking about your spirituality, you're talking about your policies, you're talking about your liberty, you're talking about your way of life. And if cannabis is incorporated in our social framework, our cultural framework, our policy framework, our legislative framework, we would have a better tomorrow and a better today, as a matter of fact. Why? Because cannabis has the means and the opportunity from a spiritual perspective to act as an entheogen. What is an entheogen? Theo is or related to God, the theosophy, theology, the study of theology. Theo is a word that denotes God. And gen speaks to produce something. So genetics, genes, produce. So when you have an entheogen, that is a practice, or it's a substance, or a practice in combination with a substance that takes you into a God-produced state. What are entheogens? Clapping and singing all night long until you enter in the spirit. What is an entheogen? The bongos are beating their drums and chanting their psalms until they get into an ecstatic state where they can commune with the I above. What is an entheogen? People who fast for very long periods of time or engage in highly exertive activities, the marathon runner's high. That's an entheogenic state. What is an entheogenic state? You've been dancing in the church all night long, and you find that at a certain point you were tired, but then at another point something else kicked in and you went into yourself and you were able to connect with the higher forces, and you were able for that entire period to do it without any kind of fatigue at all, because you went in. You went into the Christ. What is the Christ? The Christ is the presence of the divine within I. In Kemet, it was called the Kares. The Kares literally means the anointing. The anointing includes what? The anointing includes the anointing oil. What does the ingredients of the anointing oil contain? Let's go to Exodus chapter 30, verse 23 to verse 30. Yahuwah Yod He Vav He speaking to Moses. He's giving him the ingredients to create the holy anointing oil. Every prophet, every king, every piece of furniture, including the Ark of the Covenant, whether you think it's in Ethiopia or Kenya, must be smeared by the holy anointing oil. It contains cassia, it contains cinnamon, it contains olive oil, it contains myrrh, but it also contains an ingredient that is mistranslated as Calamus. Calamus is Strong's H, as it were, Cane Bossem, which is to say Cane as in sweet aromatic bossem, reed. And so, as a matter of fact, it's the other way around. Cane as in reed, bossem as in fragrant, aromatic. So this aromatic fragrant herb that you see there in the Septuagint, it was translated as Calamus because 70 Hebrew African elders was hired by Ptolemy to translate the Hebrew scriptures into the Greek. And when they did that, either by way of mistake, either by way of error, or by way of throwing the Greek invader of Kemet off of the scent of the actual ingredient, they gave the wrong ingredient. So Calamus does not come from Cane Bossem. Cane Bossem, the Hebrew term, very easily, by way of etymological and linguistic drift and mutation, becomes cannabis. It's a real stretch to take Cane Bossem and end up with Calamus with it. But that's what was written in the Septuagint. And because most of our Bibles come from that family tree, from the Septuagint and the Masoretic text, which is borrowing heavily, etc., we find that the error comes down to us. So when we read in our Bibles Calamus, it should say cannabis. Instead of saying Calamus, it should say Ganja. Instead of saying Calamus, it should say sensimania. What does that mean? That means that Moses prescribed cannabis, sensimania, ganja, kushung, peng, kush, whatever you want to call it, lamb's beard, lamb's breath, whatever you want to call it, Malawi gold. He prescribed that in the holy anointing oil and in the holy incense. That's why it is found in Jerusalem on their altars. That's why it is found in the archaeology when a young lady was found and she was treated in her pregnancy utilizing, as it were, cannabis. That's why it was found there, because it was holy and pure to us as a culture and people. So Rastafari was absolutely right all along.
Yeah, I'm a Gideon. Cataclysmic forces, good over evil. Yeah, for the ghetto youth. I see the youths nowadays, they growing up. Wanna know the truth, they wanna know what's up. They got no fear now, they'll call you bluff. They asking questions cause they had enough. Why? Some gone astray cause times is tough. Some walk with the machine, ready to bust. I'ma give you when things get dangerous. No, in the ghetto things get dangerous. On the battlefield things get dangerous. Them carry RPG, M16. Got a problem to wipe out your whole team. For American dream, them get scanned and lost. And put us into the ghetto, try abandon us. Cause we the remnant of the first sons of Kush. Warrior tribes, we not the ones to push. Just look into them history, see we rebellious. That's cause them systems so unjust. Take the shackles and chains, change them to handcuffs. Release your physical frame, them want your brain. Them a vampire looking for blood to drain. Highly Selassie come and break every chain. Bob Marley tell them, now we tell them again, yo. We tell them this ain't a game, but this a Armageddon, you got to mentally train. Yeah, I tell them this ain't a game, but this is heaven on earth, or go burn in the flames. Yeah, I tell them this ain't a game, I say I gotta play your hate cause some things gotta change. I tell them this ain't a game, but this a time for African people to rise. I tell them